All right, let's get going. Hi, I'm Len Knie. Welcome to the 9th annual University of Minnesota Spatial Forum. It's Happy GIS Day, right? International GIS Day going on here. Thanks for joining us this year. It's good to see some new faces, good to see some people who've been around for many years. As we begin the event, I would like to acknowledge that the University of Minnesota is located on traditional, ancestral, and contemporary lands of Indigenous people. We encourage you to look at the Marlene Miles map of the Dakota homelands, which is a powerful representation of the place we're at now. And there's a quick link there, and we'll provide that as well in another time. Quick promo for the U-Spatial Mapping Prize. We've been holding this for 9 years, and our goal is to support spatial thinking through excellence in mapping. This is a message for students here. I want you all to enter this. This is last year's winning submission, Andrew Hallberg from Conservation Science, looking at bird strikes on the map. So we're looking for cartographically beautiful maps, but there's also criteria in there that is words like informative, revealing, provocative, and transformative. Funded by Esri President and University of Minnesota alum Jack Dangerman, the prize is open to all undergrad and grad students. Many categories, grand prize is $1,000. Due date, May 10th. I know this is only going to be on here for a second. You can Google Mapping Prize, you'll find it. And look at last year's entries. We're getting some amazing maps out there, so please enter it. All right, I'm turning it over to Bob McMaster, Vice Provost and Dean of Undergraduate Education, as well as Professor in Geography, to introduce our Borchert Lecture speaker. Thanks, Bob.
I was kind of scared here because I thought Len had demoted me from a vice provost to a vice president. So, there we go. These are some photos of John Borchert that I'll talk about in a minute. So good afternoon, I'm Bob McMaster, and I'm a faculty member here in the Geography Department on occasion, and currently work in the University of Minnesota Office of the Provost. So today I'm really pleased to be able to welcome this year's John Borchert Lecture speaker, and to introduce Nadine Alameh, the Inaugural Executive Director of the Taylor Geospatial Institute, and we'll say more about that in just a moment. Each year, we're very fortunate that members of the Borchert family are able to join us for this lecture. They had to come last year because the lecture was on John Borchert, so, but I'm pleased to acknowledge Bob and Barb Borchert. And Dave and Pat Borchert. And somewhere here we have Bill Borchert. I also wanted to acknowledge a longtime colleague who shows up to this every year. I think that's just remarkable. And that's Rod Squires, who came to our department in 1972 and still is active. I think that's terrific. We greatly appreciate the Borchert family taking the time to be here and celebrate the memory of John. And John Borchert was a very special colleague of ours. Believe it or not, this is now the 17th John Borchert Lecture in Geographic Information Science. Our first was in the spring of 2008. Some of our previous speakers, and many of you have been here for these lectures at this event, have included Jack Dangermont. He was the inaugural one where he received an honorary doctorate. Michael Goodchild, Mark Mominier, Tim Nyergis, David DiBiase, Nina Lam, Tom Fisher, Jessica Hellman, Don Wright, Shawn Wang, and other luminaries in our discipline of geography and GI science. So when talking about John Borchert, and these are, again, several photos of John that I enjoy seeing, as well as the plaque in the lower right that acknowledges that our map library is named after John Borchert. I put this up so you can see my excellent photographic skills on this. When talking about John, I used to say, as most of you know, but given the changes at this university, I now should perhaps say, as some of you know, or even as a few of you know, John Borchert, one of the intellectual fathers of our geography department, had a great love of maps and spatial information. In fact, because of this great interest in cartography and spatial information, our internationally recognized map library was named after him, the Borchert Map Library, in May of 1989. John Borchert was one of the most influential geographers of the 20th century. Educated in geology at DePauw University, and having completed a PhD with a focus in climatology from the University of Minnesota Eastern Branch, that's University of Wisconsin, he turned his keen mind to human settlement patterns and urban geography. A Regents Professor at this university and a member of the National Academy of Sciences, at that time one of the very few geographers so named, John was a member of the geography faculty for 40 years, from 1949 to 1989, with a career that intellectually spanned the discipline from biophysical science to urban geography. In fact, his dissertation was on climatology. But his work always maintained a constant focus on the map as the obligatory tool of our profession. It's another influential Minnesota geographer, and I love to read this quote, Yi-Fu Tuan, who wrote, "In a period of intellectual flux," this is from 1989, "when geography seems tempted to follow the non-geographical sirens of transient glamour, John Borchert always manages to anchor the discipline's sense of identity on the rock of cartographic information." Several of John's last projects focused on the upper Middle West and Minnesota. His seminal book, America's Northern Heartland, An Economic and Historical Geography of the Upper Middle West, was published in 1987 and won several awards. And his video series for public TV, The Geography of Minnesota, appeared in the early 1990s. I remember well sitting in on John's Minnesota class during my first year here, 1990-91, and I could not have had any better preparation for life in my new home state. Thus, John remained very active in research after his retirement and passed away in spring of 2001. For those of you who are interested, there's a great website. You can ping on it with lots of great information about John. So in 2008, given his signature contributions to our department in the field of geography and his great love of our field, geography and maps, the University of Minnesota named this GIS lecture series after him. So this year's distinguished speaker is Dr. Nadine Alameh, the previous CEO and president of the Open Geospatial Consortium, who recently was appointed the inaugural Executive Director of the Taylor Geospatial Institute, TGI, a consortium of 8 research institutions led by St. Louis University. The Open Geospatial Consortium, OGC, I know we're here to hear Nadine, not me, I'll get through this, that Nadine Alameh led until recently is a global membership collective with more than 500 private academic research and nonprofit organizations working to advance geospatial science and information. She served as the organization's CEO and president since 2019. And before taking the helm at OGC, Open Geospatial Consortium, Dr. Alameh held various roles in industry, from the chief architect for innovation in Northrop Grumman's Civil Solutions Unit, to CEO of an aviation data exchange startup, to senior technical advisor for NASA's Applied Program. And in the early 2000s, she launched and led several successful startup companies as well. In her new position, the Taylor Geospatial Institute aims to advance geospatial science through the multi-institutional interdisciplinary collaborations to create innovative, real-world solutions to grand societal challenges, which we have many of, and it supports a collaborative research and training environment while shaping the future of geospatial science in the United States. Dr. Alameh earned a doctorate in computer and information systems engineering from MIT, where she also earned a master's degree in civil and environmental engineering and city planning. She earned a bachelor's degree in engineering from the American University of Beirut. Finally, Dr. Alameh has received numerous honors during her career, including the 2019 Geomatics Canada Leadership and Diversity Award, the 2022 Geospatial World Diversity Champion of the Year Award. That sounds like a big award. And the 2023 Women in Technology Leadership Award in the Nonprofit and Academia category. So with that, please help me welcome Dr. Nadine Alameh, who will speak on my geospatial tech journey, what's next.
Happy GIS Day, everybody. Woohoo! So I think, that award sounds big, but I call myself the geospatial cheerleader. And that's what we're doing here. So I'm it's very humbling to be here. So thank you, Len, for this invitation. And thank you for the warm welcome. I'm having a little bit of imposter syndrome right now. It's like, should I be in front of all these amazing people that I've been meeting all day? So thank you. Thank you for being here and honoring your father's, legacy. That's the best part, to be honest with you, of the day so far. So let me see. I have a few slides for you. Here we go. All right. So I'm going to take you, or actually you did take me on a journey to see, how did I end up here with these amazing people? So I said I'm a geospatial cheerleader. I'm also a geoholic, we call ourselves. We see geospatial everywhere. And my guess is anybody here a geoholic? Yes, that's great. So my guess is everywhere I go, actually, everybody I know is a geoholic. Because if you've used the map to go from any place to another place, around the world, the same maps, right? It's the same technology that's supporting the soldiers out in the field. That's us, that's the geospatial people. If you've checked the weather anytime, tell your friends and family you're actually using geospatial data and you don't know it. Sensors everywhere, from your phones or your cars to the self-driving cars to the drones to everything. All the sensors eventually are linking to location, to geospatial. So I hope you see geospatial everywhere, and now we're seeing it. What do you want? The buildings, the cities, the transportation networks, indoor mapping, that's geospatial. Any data that we're getting from space, really any remotely sensed data, is geospatial. So whether it's from space or planes or drones or, you name it. And one of my favorites is anytime you hear anybody talk about climate, they're using geospatial data. And we've been doing this for a long, long time, right? As a geospatial community, climate to us is not a new issue, right? We've been dealing with the Earth for a long time. And what amazing times we live in today. We live in, some people call it the age of datafication. Everything is eventually coming back as data. We have an explosion. It's like we're not short on data. And our problem is maybe we have too much data, and we cannot tell which data is good, which data is bad, which data is fake, which data is artificially intelligently, generated. So it's interesting times, but they're also amazing, amazing times. So this is geospatial to me, and I'll show you some examples. This is in a geospatial product. Every feature you see here on the screen has been generated, extracted using AI from space or Earth observation imagery. We can get to the level of extracting every tree, and these are, I call them, this is not a Hollywood movie, these are not fake trees. We actually then can link those features to the actual features, to the actual attributes. When you hear people talk about digital twins, everything relating to anything that we see in our streets, in our maps, is actually real to us. It's letting us, in this case, this is New York City, we can model the wind inside of buildings because we've got the data, right? We've got the patterns. We have the data from the past, the models, and now the buildings. So it's amazing. This is what we're doing with geospatial right now. It makes me so happy with this new generation. So this is another company. The previous company was Hexagon. This is Cesium. So they're known for 3D stuff. And this is your real data about the Earth, but it's in a simulation for, hand gliding. And what they're trying to show here is how far we've come, where we can blur between reality and synthetic data, right? In this case, for simulation, for modeling, or for fun. I think this is amazing. Pick any mountain in the world and jump off of it, and you can actually do that these days. This is your data, right? This is you, smart people. Here's another example where the amazing stuff that we can do, I call it back to reality. Since I've done, urban planning and transportation and all of that, this is amazing because now we're not just seeing things on the screen. We just saw it in GeoCommons earlier when we can now do virtual reality, augmented reality. Look at this. In this case, it's Boston using Esri software, and we can see the city from every perspective. And then we can actually, do all these scenarios. Do you want scenario A, and what's going to happen? And is it scenario B, and what's going to happen? And they even do these simulations of where you're going to place certain buildings and how's the shadow going to affect the gardens around or the traffic, et cetera, et cetera. This is amazing. This is really amazing. And this is all what we're doing with geospatial these days. So there's a lot of videos here that you can browse at your convenience. What I love about geospatial is also that we're now linking the digital world with the physical world. So this is another company from Canada. Same deal. Every feature you see here was extracted using AI from some sort of imagery. And then they overlay sensor information. Right? So this is sensors of the water levels, the cars, so the transportation network. So you have actually, when we talk about situational awareness in one package, we're getting it there. And I think for us, who feels like they've been in GIS for a long time, I think this is what we've been thinking about for a long, long time when it was the first time we opened any GIS package, but now it's actually happening, and it's actually happening all over the world. I like this one. It's like a tangent to geospatial. So this is AWS. So this is AWS at the reInvent conference. It's their major conference, last year in Vegas. And what they're trying to do is large-scale spatial simulation. So they're taking, they worked with geospatial companies to get all the context, right? Because this is a lot of modeling, and they're overlaying people at scale, at city scale. So you can then run these simulations of if there's an emergency, what would people do? Where should people go? What's the likelihood that you're gonna, have some, accidents? Where should you place the ambulances or get them ready, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So to me, wow, we're not just your usual geospatial people. AWS is into this now. And guess who's into it too? The gaming people. So any people, gaming addicts, or have kids who are gaming addicts, be honest. So I have two of them, two boys, which is 12 and 16. But this to me is huge because all of a sudden I tell them, my kids think I'm, of course, the most boring person, I'm a geek, et cetera, until I was on this panel with the Roblox CTO talking about what? Geospatial standards. And we're like, woo, my mom is cool. Yes. So this is huge because this is, to me, is a turning point with geospatial when a totally different industry, the gaming industry and the entertainment, the Hollywood, they're coming to us because we've got the data and we've got the models for the data in the different domains. So if you really want to build those digital twins, and what we gain from them is this ability of people working in the same environment, the scale that they do things at, the processing, the visualization, etc. It's amazing. Who's heard of ChatGPT? I promise you this presentation was not generated by ChatGPT, because that's the latest thing, right? I've been at events where they say, I had ChatGPT write my abstract and do my presentation. So this is where we're going. So this is a small business in Spain. It's called CartoDB, and they're experimenting with MapGPT. And by the way, there are a lot of startups that are doing this. Some call it MapGPT, EarthGPT, GeoGPT, whatever you want to call it. But how can we do this such that you don't have to be an expert to be able to do certain things? And in this case, I picked my example, which is where's the Starbucks? It's a real example. It's a real pain. But this is where we're going. So I'm very excited about geospatial. I've been in geospatial for 20 years. I'm very excited. And I think it's not then a big surprise to anybody why I jumped at the opportunity to join the Taylor Geospatial Institute. I feel I'm at the right place at the right time. Who has heard of the Taylor Geospatial Institute other than the introduction? So, not a lot of people, because it's very new, right? So it's a brand new institute, and it is, from what I understand, the largest philanthropic gift for geospatial science by Andy Taylor, who's the chairman of Enterprise Rental Cars. So he put this amazing gift to set up a geospatial research institute. So that's the Taylor Geospatial Institute. And it's a new institute. I've been there for 2 months, so we're sort of in this forming stage, and that's exactly why I'm here, so that we can form, in a collaborative mode from the very beginning, and also to hear, what should we be doing and where should we be focusing our energy and resources. So at this level, we're trying to fuel this revolution or accelerate this revolution in geospatial science and technology. Starting multi-institutions, so you see the institutions at the bottom, led by St. Louis University and 7 other universities and research centers in the Midwest, and collaborations. So with respect to focus areas, if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense to focus on 3 things. So food systems is sort of the low-hanging fruit because it's the Midwest and, the agriculture, here, as well as the Danforth Plant Science Center, which is one of the leading plant science centers in the world. So that's easy. Health systems, we have a few, top medical schools, and we had COVID, so it's a great marriage when we figured out the value of geospatial with disease, spread and prediction and all of that. So that's easy too. And national security is probably the easiest thing because geospatial is in St. Louis because the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency is in St. Louis, so it makes perfect sense. And they've decided to essentially move their headquarters to a new location, the shiny multi-billion-dollar complex that's going to be it. So it makes a lot of sense for national security to be one of the 3. In the middle, no surprise, AI, data analytics, everybody's doing that. And sort of, I think, what I've been hearing, especially, in the last 2 months, is actually the umbrella over everything is perhaps our sustainability, the climate impact or the climate risk or adaptation or whatever you want to call it, climate something. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to build a world-class collaborative for research. We're trying to do an infrastructure with data and tools so that we can partner with, our partners everywhere. We're trying to be part of this effort for training or preparing the next generation. And my favorite is, from the get-go, we want this research to be linked to commercialization. So papers are great and patents are great, but in this case, we're pushing, businesses, startups, systems, applications that are going to go there in the real world. And, having been in industry, this is very cool to me, and I'm looking forward to see what's going to happen with a research institute that's starting with commercialization in its beginning. The best part of this that makes my job, I think easier, is that you have a whole ecosystem in St. Louis that's said geospatial. Our whole economic development approach, our focus is geospatial. So it makes it much easier when you have the support of everybody around you, right? You have industry, you have government, you have politicians, right? And you have research and academia. So this is very cool. So I stand here sometimes, I was like, wow, this is amazing. I'm so lucky. How did I get here? Do you remember how you got here? Like, I took the bus. So I like this, we were talking about this earlier today. Each one of us got here in a totally, totally different path, because that's geospatial. It's so random, but then we come together as a community. So here's how I got into it, which is totally by, by luck. So I grew up in Beirut, Lebanon. I went to the American University of Beirut. That whole experience living in war without electricity and all of that is another talk. But MIT came to the American University of Beirut with 4 scholarships and to give to the top 4 students, and I was one of the top 4. They handed them out. We didn't know whether it's geospatial or whatever you want. Somebody gives you a ticket to MIT, you take it, okay? So off we go. So it was in the urban studies and planning, and where we were starting to build this GIS capability. And this was between 95 and 99, right? So this was the days of when NASA at the JPL started to put a web service to expose the Landsat data to everybody who could use it, all right? This was one of the many sources of data. And my advisor, who at the time I thought was so mean, because when I would want to demonstrate a concept, right? And I would go and demonstrate it in Esri package, right? He would say, go back. I want to see the same thing work in, at the time, GeoMedia. I want to see the same thing work with MapInfo. Don't hack it for a specific software. I want to make sure that it actually works regardless. So that started my interest in standards, because standards is the lazy way to do this. Do it once, and then I don't care what package. We've decided on the protocol, we've decided on the format, right? So then it's really not dependent on what package you're using. And that became the thing that I've been cheerleading for years, interoperability and standards. That got me sucked into the Open Geospatial Consortium world, OGC at the time, where it was also the very first web service. It was called the Web Map service, which is a very simple way to request pieces of a map in very simple formats, just the piece that you want, but you can request it from any mapping source, right? Mix and match. That's the whole idea of standards. This was cool, and then it became super useful in 9/11. Do you remember where you were in 9/11? Everybody remembers, right? Literally all over the world. 9/11 was huge for geospatial, and it was even more huge for geospatial standards. because they had to get data from different sources to the people on the ground who couldn't see things, and you can't wait 3 months, right? So that push for standardization and the value of geospatial. So I actually borrowed this. If you Google, by the way, geospatial and 9/11, which I did in preparation of this, it's really very nice. Somebody should write something because it's really cool. So I got these things. So we had aerial photos and overlaying, thermal sensors on top. They've had the same aerial images with the streets and the building footprints, same thing. This is for, situational awareness. LiDAR, I love this. It says LiDAR had a coming-of-age moment because it could see through the smoke, and it could help actually detect where the buildings were. This is really huge. And then the handheld devices, also the beginning where you need to put the map on the phone because we're not going to drag the equipment. We're not going to print. And they printed tons of maps, but it was that beginning. And so from somebody who's just like fascinated with geospatial and with standards, it was a defining moment. We went from the silos to having to work together. We need the interoperability. We need the standards. So it was really a defining moment in the story, I think, of geospatial and geospatial interoperability. Personally, that got me my green card, my permanent residency. So the prototype that we built at MIT to get data from different satellite imagery and mosaic them together was actually used during the rescue efforts. And, America is the best country on earth. So here we are. So I ended up after that at the NASA Geospatial Interoperability Office. So it's like, I stuck to this interoperability theme big time. So the Geospatial Interoperability Office at NASA was part of the Earth Science Division, so it's just about the Earth. And it was the office where people came to use NASA's data for a variety of uses. And this was also the beginnings, where instead of just like you call me and I give you an FTP, and you call me and I'll give you a file and God knows what, this is just, optimizing that whole process. Here it is. I have a web service on top. I have metadata. Go crazy. Don't call me, right? One of the major challenges we had, so this is between 2001 and 2004, is that our lives at this Geospatial Interoperability Office, I kid you not, at least once a week, mostly once a day, you had to justify what you're doing. Why are you doing this? What are you doing again? Who's using the data? And this is why, to me, the other defining moment was Google Earth. Do you remember Google Earth? Yes. So when it came out, I know this is being taped, but as researchers, we hated Google Earth. You know why? Because all of a sudden, everybody knew exactly what we were doing for years that we couldn't articulate. Everybody now was starting to find their houses and look at my car and your car and my street, and we're like, that's what we've been telling you we're doing for all these years. So Google made it happen. It's interesting. So Google bought this company. This is, 2004? Keyhole, right? The interesting thing is actually Keyhole, the one with the rotating globe and all of this, was not actually doing well until somebody from CNN used it to portray some imagery in the Iraq War in between 2001 and 2003. And this is when Google saw it on CNN, bought it for like 1.7 or whatever billions of dollars. So the reason I say this is a defining moment for geospatial people like us, geoholics, is that we were a niche, and we had to explain what we're doing, and then all of a sudden, they say your mom and your grandma and your neighbor, they all sort of knew how to interact with this, which is really, really huge. So that was great. the other great thing is I hope everybody does that as well, is to figure out how can we use this geospatial to help in various domains. So one of these experiments was this company. So I started the US subsidiary of a British company, started the subsidiary in the US. So this is 2014-ish, the beginning of the cloud. I was like, oh, we can put data on the cloud. I can build a business by putting data on the cloud and streaming data, having these subscriptions so people can buy the data that they need. So in this case, we used it for aviation. So this is aviation information, right? Your maps, actually, this is your aviation information, maps of airports and airspaces, your weather information, and then your flight information. We used to call them the three witches. And the reason they're relevant here is that actually if you go to them, you'll see that it's all geospatial. So we actually, if you're geeks, we actually import geospatial schemas in there for all the features, for all the airspaces. I mean, you name it, because it's all geospatial. Even we found out that we have this amazing power that geospatial people are not just good with space, we're amazing with time, right? And everything depends on time in aviation. When will the airspace be closed so I can plan accordingly? When will this runway be open? When will it be utilized? So that time factor gave us the strength. So in this business, we ended up winning like innovation awards. It's like, wow, we helped transform. We were part of the transformation, right, of a whole industry that's very conservative, but now is seeing the light of tech, cloud, geospatial. And I love it. It's when you go to just like super formal documents by ICAO, which is the International Civil Aviation Organization, you'll actually see in there Open Geospatial Consortium standards and ISO, ISO TC 211 standards. We're cool, guys. We're really cool. It's like, so as you can see, I'm very passionate about those standards. So I tell them in 2019, I gave up. And I said, OK, I'm going to work for OGC. Let's do this. So I became the CEO and president of OGC, which is a global consortium. So you got the governments, name it, NASA, NGA, or European Space Union, or European Space Agency, or the Natural Resources Canada, or Singapore Land Authority. I can go, so all the governments are there. Industry, which was interesting to see when we started with, Esri and Trimble and Hexagon and Bentley, and then came with Force, AWS and Microsoft and Google, and then we had Apple joining. So it's like all of a sudden, whoa, right? The universe is exploding. And my favorite part is before I left, the last 3 years are all names that we've never seen before, which is really, really cool. It means we are creating a whole new market of opportunities for businesses and entrepreneurs because there's data and there's problems that we can solve. So it was a great time to be at this, global consortium for geospatial because things have changed a lot, actually, between, 2011 and 2019. So during that period, actually many things have changed. I already touched on a few. But to me, part of it is, look at this. Something called UNGGIM was started. This is, what is this? The UN Global Geospatial Information Management. This is huge. So now when you go to the UN, right, it's not like geospatial, it's a geeky thing. It's not the geospatial as the support tool. This is geospatial as strategy for countries at the UN level. And it's so cool to walk into the UN and actually have geospatial people. It means ministers of countries, right, have to represent their countries, and they have to start talking about what do we have in terms of a national spatial data infrastructure. Again, this is really, talk about elevating what we're doing to an impactful level. It happened lower too. So in the UK, this is 2018, it announced a new geospatial commission. So they said we really need to start, maximizing the value of all government data, and they had many reports showing the value of location data in their ecosystem. So how many businesses it supports, how many government functions, how many new talent, et cetera, et cetera. Interestingly, the reason they came together, because it's not easy to bring government together, right? So the reason they came together was one use case, which is underground infrastructure. So if you Google underground infrastructure London, you'll find billions of dollars wasted every year in London. It's not a big space, okay? Right? Why? Because it's a mess down there, right? It's a mess underground. The electric cables and the water and the internet and the metro or the tube, it's just like, again, it goes back to, can we share information? What's the standard for sharing this information? Who's gonna pay for this? Because the utility companies and the government and the citizens and. So this is huge. The same thing happened in the US. So this is, I don't know, we geospatial geeks celebrated the Geospatial Data Act of 2018. You know why? Because now there's a law in the US that says geospatial. Doesn't it validate everything that we do? And it makes it just more visible to everybody. So I love this a lot. That's how I met Ryan. So we're both in the National Geospatial Advisory Committee. And this is, once again, could we stop duplicating the efforts for data collection? Could we agree on what we're going to do together for the future in terms of, analytics or disaster response or climate, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this was, 2018? And then something happened in 2020. What happened in 2020? I like this. What happened? I heard it. COVID happened. Oh my God, COVID happened, right? And what happened in COVID? Again, Google, geospatial and COVID, but I love this. COVID-19 made geospatial leaders front page news, right? This is definitely a moment in history for geospatial, because we were tracking the disease spread, but we were also tracking the vaccines, and we were tracking the number of beds in hospitals and the death and the supply chains that were disrupted because of COVID. It's all geospatial. So this was definitely huge. I was actually, this specific example is from one of my good friends, Frank Winters. He used to be the New York Geospatial Information Officer, and he has retired. But he invited me to this call. This is during literally the height of COVID, and New York had a problem, right, because it's dense. And it was the state and the counties. And you should see, or you should hear those exchanges. I can't get the data. Do you have the data? Yes, call this guy. No, I'm going to call this guy. But I emailed you last week. But did you email me this morning? And I was like, oh, my God, do you know that we have the technology? We have it already. We didn't invent anything special for COVID as geospatial people. We just used what we already have. And so for me, again, from the Open Geospatial Consortium angle, from the standards angle, this was a huge, huge drive to get geospatial out of geospatial. Let's start to, lower the barrier for anyone who wants to get this data through very, very simple, we call them APIs. It's the same APIs, the same technology that you can get any other data, so people can get a little bit of geospatial and a little bit of non-geospatial, which I don't know if it really exists, because I think everything is geospatial. And then you can do it. You can do it for health or for security or for food, I don't care. You can actually mix and match. This, again, I think is one of the reasons why we have a lot of startups, right? It's just easier right now to combine data with other data because as geospatial people, we're not in the corner anymore. We're like right in the middle. We're on the same bus as everybody, and in some cases ahead of them. So this was amazing, and it began a whole new era, I think. Again, this is my journey from 2020 on 2023. And I can't spend a lot of time on this, but I'll think about this. During this time, cloud, right? We have something now called cloud-native geospatial, which is huge. Because if you think about it, we have this model right now where I download the data, I do something with the data, right? And I put it back. This cloud-native geospatial movement is, don't give me the data, keep it on the cloud. I can process on the cloud, and I can share it with you on the cloud, right? It's a totally different way of interacting with this data. Very, very powerful. That's why I said earlier to the students this morning, you are very spoiled because you get to do this. And this essentially, this is the new era of even new data formats. So if you hear of cloud-optimized GeoTIFF or cloud-optimized point cloud, so all of these new formats are starting to pop up, essentially, to make it easier to work with the geospatial data on the cloud, which is very powerful. Why? Because it's like the Google Earth example. It's like the APIs. It's getting us out of our geospatial bubble because you put on the cloud everything, and now you can do right? It's my best. So there's even now a Cloud Native Geospatial Foundation. I think it started this summer. So this is like fresh, hot off the press for Cloud Native Geospatial. Another thing I think is related to the cloud is Earth observation explosion. Right? I mean, you see how many companies or how many entities now are launching satellites, seriously, like, if you follow, Twitter and how many of these companies are piggybacking on, SpaceX's recent launch from 2 days ago, and you literally see the list of companies and the list of sensors they're sending, and it's just like, you don't recognize half of the names or 90% of the names because we had this boom, right? There were these SPACs and this investment in space. And it's hard to keep track, but some people are specializing in data, and some people specializing in the platforms, others in analytics, others are just like, we're just doing energies and utilities, and again, you name it. So there's this big explosion of new players and new data that only makes sense if you combine it with some other data, right? I mean, that's the thing about data. So because of that, another thing happened in the last 3 years, mostly, right? This thing called GeoAI. So everybody has been talking about AI. And now, again, Google, what is this GeoAI? And we've been using it a lot and increasingly because this Earth observation data, nobody can zip through it without artificial AI, right? Without the AI part, the A in the AI. So GeoAI has been a movement where companies, you see them, they become .AI again. So if you look again at the OGC members, the new ones are all .AI. It's like, there's a market for this. And it's feature extraction from space, like I showed you the trees or the transportation network. It's the clustering analysis. It's the classification. It's predictive analytics, you name it, right? But it's, to me, I hear some people saying, yay, we're using AI in geospatial. When I look at it, I feel that actually geospatial people are adding to AI this whole perspective of looking at data from spatial patterns. This is next to this. This is happening frequently when these two things are next to each other or away from each other and so on. This is us. Right? I think, can we say GIS Day 2023, we are changing AI, right? We are this community. The other thing that happened big time in the last, again, this is a short period of time when I think years of hard work, all of a sudden, you know, you see the results of them. The 3D. 3D is finally real, right? It's actually, you have so much data in 3D. So in this case, I'm looking at it from a standards perspective. So this is 3D at the scale of cities, at the scale of countries in some cases. But in these cases, Esri and Cesium specifically pushed standards for streaming geospatial 3D data, because you want it on your phone, and you don't want the whole data set. So how do you stream 3D geospatial information? Who was interested in this? This is why the gaming companies came, right? We did the geospatial 3D streaming, and then they said, oh, I can navigate inside buildings, outside buildings, underground, and these people can do it? Oh, I'm gonna talk to them, which is very cool. Take it one step further, I'm sure you've heard of digital twins. So there's been a lot of studies and a lot of work and a lot of demonstrations, actually, and implementations of digital twins. So in this case, there's actually a report from the World Geospatial Industry Council. It's another organization that has, geospatial industry represented to find opportunities for the geospatial companies everywhere. And once again, I mean, I don't know if I can read this, but like the market for this is 25 billion in 2026 or something. It's like coming up. Grab those billions quick. And this is, again, this is to us, when I first saw digital twin and people started this buzzword, and you look at it and you go, oh my God, that's what I've been thinking about all this time. I just never called it digital twin. I never had the infrastructure to be able to have the static data and the dynamic data, right? The buildings and the roads, and also the cars and the traffic and the people and, the dynamic, the sensor stuff. And I go back to, this is really cool when you have plugins bringing geospatial 3D to mainstream gaming engines. One of my favorite events, actually, on geospatial 3D, it was actually with the entertainment industry. So those people were actually doing movies, and they wanted the data. Again, think about it. You get the backdrop. Why fake backdrops? We have real backdrops. Think about it, right? And I was like, I felt cool, because my LinkedIn was like, Oscar nominee this. And I was like, ooh, okay, just take me to an Oscar party. That's all I need to validate my whole career. But this is when, remember when I said I see geospatial everywhere? Like even at the movies, I see geospatial everywhere. And I love, this is one of my favorite things, when I see anything by NVIDIA, so with the GPUs, so this is taking it to the next level. This is processing to the next level, right? This is not digital twin of a city or a country. This is a digital twin of the Earth, right? And the power of being able to do simulations at that scale, right? It's up to us. We still need the data. We still need the models. But in my head, I imagine my kids are big on the Avenger movies, or, it's like when you can go back in time and live in different realities. This is very close to it. One of the demonstrations that I loved was actually several Earths next to each other, and imagine applying a different climate model and then seeing what happens. And I was like, I'm in an Avenger movie. This is so cool. So we're doing it. It's geospatial. It's really geospatial. So is this amazing or what? Yes. All right. But please explain to me, right? So this is so amazing and so gratifying. And then I see things like this. I see deadly floods everywhere, right? This is Europe. This is recently. And actually, the article talks about the they had all the information. It wasn't at the right time. So this is when we talk right information, right user, right time. Right? We can do this together. We can do this. It's just not getting there for some reason. You look, same thing, flooding. It doesn't discriminate. And I love, like recently, the DHS, and part of their strategy is just looking at these borderless problems. Because when you have floods or disasters, it's not like, or even COVID, it doesn't stop at the zip code or, the county level. It just does not. And in this case, it's even more global. So this is repetition, right? This is the same flood happening in the same place 2 years in a row with hundreds of thousands of people. And then this is when it gets even more interesting. So you look at Greece, this is this summer, I think this is August. Again, this is like, we're talking August. In 2 months, they had the worst wildfires and then the worst flooding, which now I understand are actually related. So disasters are related. You can't just say, oh, I'm studying flooding, sorry, you go study wildfire over there. Doesn't work that way. The heat, I think you can go on, but for the sake of time, NOAA has been, I think, documenting the rate and the extent of disasters over the last few years. And you look, now we have in 5 years as much as we had previously in 10 years. It costs way more, and more people die, which is weird. You look at the climate. I took a screenshot from, this is climate.gov. You don't have to get into the details, but to look at every line is in the wrong direction. Something is off, right? Your greenhouse up and sea level, sea ice down, just like every line is in the opposite direction. So when I go back, it's like, okay, my God, I can stand here and say, we are the best, but it's like, oh, we have a lot of work to do, so don't go party just yet. We have a lot of work to do. We have work to do, I think, on a few angles, which I'll leave you with. And the good thing is, we're not just sitting, we're actually doing many of them, so that's really good. So one of them is being more visible in the climate discussions and the climate decisions. We need to be just way more visible. It's not like, oh, these geeks do it, and we're over here, the climate, and we're over here, the decision makers. No. So it started to me, right, when in COP26, which is where all the governments come together, this, I think, 2 years ago, we actually organized, it was virtual, COVID, a geospatial pavilion, right? Come see, because, just like, please come see. We can help. Right? And more recently, right now, we see it in the NGAC, we see it with the camera, the CMRA, which is climate monitoring and resilience. So we're doing these things. The Europeans are doing the same. The Canadians are doing the same. The Asians are doing the same. We can do more by actually working together a little bit more, or much, much more. So one, being just more visible in the climate discourse overall. 2, I think one of our major problems when you go back to the flooding and you look at the use cases, it's because the data, which we say we're drowning in, you can't find it when you need it. And when you find it, it's still not accessible, and it's not interoperable, and I call it, it's actually reusable, but you hack it. We're all reusing and reinventing the wheel. And come on, people, we can send a rover to Mars that takes videos and we bring them back, but we can't fix this problem. So let's work on fair. When you hear fair, findable, accessible, interoperable, reusable. I would like to show up at the GIS day one day, not have to say the word fair, because that's done. This fair thing at the bottom, at the end, to me, part of it is this, the standards and the interoperability. I've been saying this for 5 years because this is what I see out in the world. Oh, interoperability, yeah, sure, we'll get to it. It's like, it should not be an afterthought. Collaboration, when we talk about climate, it has to be deliberate, not, oh yeah, sure, I'll collaborate. What do you want to do? It's like, it has to be strategic, and it's an investment. Yes, collaborating with somebody else and sharing data or information or best practice is on top of the work. Right now, it counts as, oh my God, I have to do it because nobody's accounting for it. It has to be part of our planning. It has to be deliberate interoperability, deliberate collaboration. I took this from yesterday. There was a National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine. It looks like we have a geospatial workforce crisis. So everywhere I go, you say, what's your, what keeps you up at night? And they say, there's the global competition, there's climate, and then there's a talent shortage. So we should, again, invest some resources into this. So we're in the right place at the right time here. Again, it's not like we're sitting and lamenting. There are a lot, actually, of initiatives out there from some major organizations like the Group on Earth Observation or the Geospatial Intelligence Agency. There are, things happening in India, things happening everywhere, which is really, really good. So this is preparing the next generation. And I'll leave you with one thing, which is, since we're talking about the next generation, and it was eye-opening to me because I'm an engineer, so I'm a geek. I'm coming at this from a technical perspective. And we need to start thinking about ethics a little bit more seriously. So I appreciated this a lot during COVID because it was, tracing movement and people, and some people misusing the information, mobility data, telecom data, credit card data, etc. So this is actually a very nice initiative. It's called the Locust Charter. So this is a bunch of geospatial organizations led by AGS, which is the American Geographic Society. They're having Geography 2050 this week, actually. And they said, let's agree, because ethics is not a law. I cannot force it on anybody, but especially since we're saying train the next generation, let's agree to have some ethical principles here, like, I don't know, understand the impact of the data, or minimize the data that you need to store, or be accountable, or address bias, or protect the vulnerable because you have that information. So there are 10 that essentially institutions all over the world can sign. It's a signature to say, you know what, I am a geospatial superhero. So with that power comes great responsibility. And this is part of acknowledging that responsibility. So we have a lot of work to do at the Taylor Geospatial Institute, right? So bringing it back, this is part of what I'm trying to do, right? Preparing the next generation, making information fair, fueling the research, solving some real problems. And I don't think we can do it alone. I don't think anybody can do it alone. And seriously, that's why I'm here, because it's only together with, other amazing people, other passionate people who are taking time to just be here, right? So thank you for that. Together we can get to this acceleration of this collective power that we have. Right? We're there. We just need to just be more deliberate about it. So I'll leave you with a quote that touched me a lot when I attended the ESRI conference last year. So not 2023, 2022. And this is from Jack. So it's interesting that he was the first speaker of the series, and I'm ending with it. I'm not ending with it because of that. I always end with this because I love this. So this is very nice. But think about it for just a little bit. The central problem of our time is our lack of understanding and our failure to collaborate, challenging our own sustainability and threatening our own future. And I think this is, again, where we can do better, right? And with that, thank you again for having me. And I'm open to questions, comments, or anything you want to talk about. If it's geospatial, hit me. Thank you.
Got microphones.
See if you have questions. One over here.
Hi, thanks for a great talk. Could you share a little bit more about some of the business models to support interoperability? You mentioned crises driving interoperability, but I think there's probably a lot of positive use cases you have too in terms of examples that you have. Thank you.
It's interesting. So we always go back to crises because response, whether it's emergency response or disaster response, are usually when you really, really want the data, when you need it. But again, having built a business on those same principles, it's then your advantage. It's the more data you can correlate and integrate in a platform to create a very unique and more accurate perspective, the better. So it gives you an edge because then you can more quickly swap data sets, swap models because they are interoperable. So it becomes a competitive advantage in the market. Yes?
I'm interested in the collaboration among the various universities in the Taylor Geospatial Institute. What role does each institution play, and how do you get that collaboration going?
When I find out, I will let you know. So, I call it the discovery phase of my job. I'm, learning about every university and the people behind the university. I can totally see some themes, emerging. So we've got, for example, AMSL, which is the University of Missouri, St. Louis. They've been already doing workforce training. So you tell them, can you also do geospatial? Boop, and then they're going to run with it. You have a group at WashU who's into computer vision, so you can totally see that that could be the expertise. St. Louis University seems to be a remote sensing-driven university, so that could be. And then you have the health and the medical school, which we're trying. So I'm starting to discover UIUC with their supercomputer and Shawen. There is no shortage of opportunities. So right now I'm in the process of understanding, what is the consortium, and then what is then the opportunity that we can pursue together, where you need the pieces of that puzzle. And with respect to collaboration, the best part, so I did this little retreat with the governing council, so this is the highest representation, and I said, what do you bring to the table? And they said, we show up. When you need us, we show up. I was like, I love this. So you have this commitment to, we just need to find the real mission, I think, which is a discovery. I mean, again, it's an open discovery, so I'm open to ideas too. Yeah. This is the best thing. Every question I can answer with, I don't know.
So I've got one that maybe you know. For many decades now, we've been talking about GIS in society and the societal implications of the technologies. And one of your last slides started to pick up on that in terms of the explosion of geospatial data, ever more fine-grained. We have all kinds of privacy laws, for instance, in the health area, HIPAA constraints and laws and rules. What are the boundaries in terms of privacy, since the genie's kind of out of the bottle right now in terms of the information that's out there? Yep. How do we think about that as GIS professionals?
So I think this was one of the drivers of this locust charter, because we are dangerous now. You give us a few data sets, and with the tools that we have, we can de-anonymize and we can figure out who's who, and people are doing it. So right now, and it's not a very strong answer, because it's ethical and it's a capitalist society, so people go after the opportunity. But for example, in OGC, we were thinking maybe we can have that. We have a lot of projects. We can have that as a criteria for a project, right? So you have to think about it. All the people in the project have to think about it and have to decide, oh, I can make this a smart building, but do I need all these sensors to know who went into the bathroom and who didn't, and all of that. So we even talked about perhaps putting it in as a checkpoint in a reference architecture. So again, this is at a technical level, so that it's in the face of even the people who are programming, so that they're thinking about it. One thing from the NGAC, the National Geospatial Advisory Committee, we were talking, we are, as geospatial people, not at the table when we talk about privacy, when we talk about AI, right? We're still not at those tables. This was one of, and we need again, when I say, we need to elevate a little bit. So at one point in OGC, we had the planning committee, which is the highest level committee, and we said, should we issue a statement about ethical use of AI, blah, 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 blah. And we talked about this. And then there was a representative of one of the large companies, and he said, I'll tell you right now, this is all great. I believe it. I'm going to take it to my CEO, and he's going to say, go away. Because if it's not a law, it's not from DC, it's not nothing. Thank you very much, geospatial community. Appreciate it. So we need to have more influence. And we're not yet. Yeah. Yes. Right here.
No, thank you for your presentation. For 25 years, I've been a consultant, mostly working in the utility space, and I found that the open geospatial data is something that was lacking in that area. I had a lot of projects, did a lot of work converting a small world database to Intergraph, or Intergraph to Esri, or Esri to Geometa, or back and forth every couple of years as the utilities merged or combined or something. And now it was time to go with the buyer's GIS. A big part of that seemed to be that the utilities or the geospatial companies themselves said, well, our database is best. Our data model, the way we do it, we don't want anyone else getting involved in that. So companies like mine that develop tools made a lot of money in that space. You mentioned Esri and some others now getting on board in 2019. Are they working to rectify that, or are they going to continue to say, the way we do it's best, but we'll figure out a way to get it out?
I think it's both, right? Because, part of the, you have to have your unique value proposition. So if we're all, so if everything is standardized. But I think the way it's been working is that these companies, when we talk about these standards, it's the fundamentals. It's not your business. It's not the differentiator, right? The idea is like, go build the differentiator. We want to encourage that. We want to encourage more of that. But the basics, which is the data format or the protocol, the basic stuff that enables you to get at least to like level 1 of interoperability. Is it perfect? It's definitely not perfect, right? Because there are different interpretations of a standard. Compliance, so we've been talking about compliance for years. It's actually not, not like formally mandated by certain government agencies or for large projects. So I think there's room there, but also at the same time, so what I've been hearing is with this cloud-native geospatial, this new generation at least, we've gone perhaps past the format, right? This is not, the model used to be, I don't care what you have in there, as long as you expose it to me in a way that I can connect it with other things, I'm fine, but that breaks. From what I'm hearing with cloud-native is when we have those cloud-native formats, we've already gone beyond that, that conflict level, because we've already agreed that we're going to have our data here, and then you can build on top of it. It's a tension. I mean, we always used to call it, it's like they're competimates sitting. But again, this is, everybody wins if you're standardizing the right thing. And I think just understanding what the right thing is, because sometimes we go swing too much, and sometimes we swing too little where it's not even a standard. And we're always in between.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think he had a question too. See, that was another question of I don't know.
So I was in St. Louis on September 11th, 2001.
Well,
stranded. I was there for a GIS conference. Those states have a consortium, NISDIC, National States Geographic Information Council, and one of the past presidents of them lives in Columbia, Missouri, where he runs the Certification Institute. They have a code of ethics. Tony Spicci, I hope you get in touch with him.
I will. Thank you. Yep. This is a, thank you. I will definitely be in touch because we've heard that criticism before. This is when we have to be our own critics as well. It's like, why are you developing your own ethical charter? Why not? What is so special about you guys that you need your own? And again, because sometimes we are in our bubble, or it's hard to connect with people outside because they don't know us. But I'll get in touch. Yeah, thank you.
We'll get in touch with everybody.
Will do. Yes, Tony, got it. Right. I think that's it. We cheer for GIS Day. Yes? Cheer. Thank you. Thanks.